So it's important, no matter which data source you plan on using, that you really know what your research question is, and if you test the theory, that you plan for collecting data points that would rule out alternative explanations. That you really know, okay, this is the only thing that explains the observations that I've seen here. In the experiments we talked about before, this is a little easier to do because you keep everything constant, hopefully, and then you vary the treatment effect. And there you look at the relationship between the treatment and something else. But if you just look, in the descriptive case or in the predictive case, or if you try to do causal inference for observational data, then this is even more important. Now, one good way to do this is to start this kind of thinking by envisioning how your results should look like. Meaning, you make an analysis plan, really specifying, ideally, every table, every graph, every piece of the report that you will be writing afterwards, and then making sure you collect data or you create new data, not making them up yourself, but collecting them in a designed way, or generating variables that out of the material that you have, so that you really can do what you planned there in your analysis plan. That means that you have to, if you do this exercise, actually, you can also make sure that you really translate or see that all concepts that you talk about are translated into features in the data set. So let me give you an example of what I mean here. This is a study prepared by Nielsen Media Research at the request of the Council of Research Excellence. The focus here was on non-response and non-response bias in Nielsen Media Research services. Nielsen asked respondents to fill out a diary on their TV viewing behavior. And they installed little recording devices to actually log the tuning behavior. So when TV is on and which channel is on, you can see that there. But not everybody participates. There's an issue of non-response. And the question is, it was for this project here, would there have been any meaningful difference between those that cooperated and those that did not? The study design for that particular research question was consisted of two sets of data. Those where a mailing address was available, in this case a sample of 7,000, which was composed out of three different groups. 2,000 in-tabs, that's Nielsen speak for respondents. 3,000 that did return something, but it wasn't of good quality. And then 2,000 that didn't return anything. Now, those aren't the actual numbers, but this is the subsample that was then used for the study. It's almost 10 years ago that this study was done, so it's easy to talk about it. Everything disclosed on the website anyway, and by now many different ways of measuring viewing anyway. The data collection is a self-administered questionnaire, multiple mailouts, and the target was to really get 90% of our respondents in this specific non-response study. So they're really trying to get everybody incentivized to participate here. Questionnaire had about 100 questions. Don't need to worry about that for this purpose. And then, of course, there were cases that did not have addresses, and here phone numbers were used and fielded. There were about 2,000 cases. So the research question in this example was, again, is there a meaningful difference between people who participate and who do not? And if you focus on the diary itself, then you can have as a first step in your analysis plan, okay, do we see an evidence of bias? And analyzing that at first in the different types of non-response, then an analysis of subgroups that are meaningful for Nielsen in this case, and a multivariate analysis. This is an idea of how the data structure looks like, and in order to evaluate the non-response bias, you need information on respondents and non-respondents. In the initial survey, there wouldn't be information on the non-respondents because they didn't participate. But there are other types of data, like the pair data we mentioned before. In this case, call record data that Nielsen collects when they try to recruit people to be part of the study, or data from commercial vendors that can be linked via a geocode to each of the addresses to then do analyses between respondents and non-respondents. And then, of course, non-response study itself, which here hopefully gets all the information on respondents and non-respondents through this extended effort. This was the plan ahead of time. And also this analysis example was a plan ahead of time to determine is the sample size enough, but also to make sure that all reporting requirements in our graphs can be actually delivered at the end of the study. So here you see the two important subgroups, INTABs and non-INTABs, so respondents and non-respondents, and a total, and an outcome variable, hours of TV viewing, right? And a reporting requirement or desire was to report the average hours of TV viewing for INTAB and non-INTABs. And these numbers here are made up, this is just some arbitrary figure, but creating mock graphs and mock tables like that will help you to know, okay, I do need these pieces of information and I need them with a certain precision. I have actually seen several surveys where people forgot to ask simple questions like gender because such an obvious one. They wanted to analyze the data by different gender categories, but if the variable is not in the questionnaire, that piece of information won't be in there. So same here, if this critical information on INTAB versus non-INTAB is nowhere on the file, or so either from the records prior that you link up or through the questionnaire, then there's nowhere to go from here.